What was the weirdest thing you ever saw? Story 1. This is a tough call. I've seen some strange things. I'm going to have to go with a classic. The time I was downtown on a hot day and saw a man eating what looked to be the remains of a hot meatball sub out of a full trash can unabashedly. That's not the weird part. I had some food in my car, which was only a block away, so I said, "Hi there. Would you like some sodas and bagels? You cream cheese? I've got some that I'd be happy to share with you." The man looked up at me disgusted before angrily saying, "I don't put that trash in my body." I had to walk away. I didn't even know what to say or if I would laugh. I was just like, "Okay, have a nice day." Story 2. Me, my brother, and a friend were camping once when I was maybe 11 or 12 way out on our 100-acre farm in small-town Kentucky. I woke up around 1:30 or so in the morning and could faintly hear a piano being played that sounded like it was coming out of the woods about 100 yards for our campsite. There is not a house or building or anything anywhere near that spot on our farm. So naturally, I think I'm just hearing things and decide to try to go back to sleep. Then my brother, who was apparently also awake, sits up and asks me if I hear a piano. We made a dash for the house and never camped out there again. Story 3. I went to a place that is famous for its medieval history, and it has a huge fair every year where people dress up in medieval costumes. Walking home late one night, I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I stopped to look, and it was a monk vigorously pounding a nun. It took my drunken self a while to realize what I was witnessing and that they were both in costume. Or so I hope. Story 4. I used to live in an area with a lot of land, and I saw a raccoon fighting a beaver. The raccoon won and started to eat the beaver. It was pretty creepy, to be honest. Probably rabies. Story 5. My brother found a flash drive in the woods. I think we opened it and found just super weird videos on it. Couldn't tell if it was an abstract film project or just a weird cult or something. I'm going to ask him about it. Story 6. The Crispy Family Carnival used to open for local punk bands. Crispy himself was a jovial fellow with a big mustache whose part in the act involved sword swallowing and lifting a car battery off the stage with chains attached to his nipple rings. When their set was over and preparations for the bands were starting, he'd casually wander around the pit with a stapler so the punks could staple their tips right onto his chest and belly. If you tipped larger bills, he'd let you staple them onto his head instead. Story 7. My friend and I gained an extra 15 minutes or so going to class one night. I think I've told this on Reddit before, but anyway, it was March 26, 1997. We remember the date because it turned out to be the day the Heaven's Gate cult committed mass suicide. My friend and I took a class together at a local community college, so she would come to my house at 6 p.m., hang around for a few minutes, and we'd head off to our 6:30 class. She gets to my house at 6. We watch The Simpsons until the first commercial break, as we always did, around 6:10. We leave the house, both of us remembering seeing the dashboard clock in her car showing the correct time. It was about a 15-minute drive to the school. We get to school around 6:25. I hang around for a minute with a friend who's having a smoke outside, then head in. We sit down in a fairly empty room. The clock in the classroom says 6:10, but we assume it's wrong. My friend's watch says it's nearly 6:30, as we'd expect it to be. We wait. Eventually, people start trickling in, and class starts 20 minutes later. We're wondering what the hell is going on. My friend checks her watch a little while later in class, and it is now showing the same time as the classroom clock. Once class was over, the dashboard clock in her car is the same as her watch. We have no idea what happened, and neither have really heard a good explanation from others as to how we appeared to get out of sync with everyone else. Story 8. I was driving with my friends at night when we came to a roundabout with about 15 people holding hands in a circle, all dressed in white gowns. I slowed at first to see what on earth was going on, but as my headlights hit them, they all turned to look at us in unison. When I tell you I have never floored it like I did at that moment, the white-hot panic flushed through all of us. For context, I live in the northwest of England, in a very quiet, normal area. It freaked me TF out. There's very little religion here like there is in the US, but it really gave me evangelical cult vibes. Story 9, weird and morbid, I guess. I was walking around the neighborhood in my Lake Cottage neighborhood after a few beers on a nice summer's afternoon. Birds were chirping, cool breeze off the lake, and I see a big dog running at me, and I was all excited because I've never been attacked by a dog before, but the dog was dragging something smaller behind it. And as it got closer, I realized it was another smaller dead dog. The genius owner decided it would be a good idea to leash his massive sheepdog-looking thing to a smaller dog. And I guess it broke the smaller dog's neck and was running around in a panic, barking and yowling. I was like, all right, I'm glad I'm not tripping on shrooms right now because this is whack. But it got worse. Some little girls came running down the road shortly after looking for their dog and saw the crime scene, and they started crying. And I didn't know what to do, so I just said the little dog was asleep while it was most definitely not in the best of shape. They saw through my bullshit and kept crying. Then another man comes running down the road towards me, and I'm starting to think back to what I did wrong in the last few weeks to deserve this. Man starts hyperventilating, saying, oh God, I'm literally standing there with a beer while kids and a man are crying next to a howling dog attached to a broke neck, dead dog. And I was just trying to enjoy a nice summer walk. I'll never forget it. It was the strangest string of events. I seemed to just have everything magnetized to me that afternoon. Story 10. I was at Red Rocks Amphitheater one night with a friend. There was no concert, but was sort of a hangout place. We pulled up and parked and got out of the truck, went to the top of the seating area, and immediately the wind picked up. Like crazy windy, there was what looked like a spotlight or flashlight moving up towards the top, just weaving in and out of the bleachers. It kept moving toward us, and we could see there was no one holding a light. No one at all. We turned around and hightailed it back to the truck in the parking lot, which was pretty full when we arrived, was completely empty now. Looking back, the light was still moving toward us. We GTFO ASAP, early 70s, so not a drone. Story 11. My sister and I were leaving a friend's house really late one night, both in our own cars. It was a super dark road, but kind of a main road between two towns. I was just ahead of her, and someone came out from the side of the road on a bicycle right in front of me. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over onto the shoulder. He was so close, I would have had to have hit him or nicked him. I get out, I'm looking around, and he is nowhere, and there is nowhere to go but up or down the street. I'm standing there wondering if I imagined the whole thing when she parks behind me and gets out and asks where he went. It was insane. We'd both seen him, and he just went poof. That was over 20 years ago, and still no clue what happened. Story 12. Me and a friend walking back from his after-school detention, UK. We stopped at the train gates. Some guy pulled up next to us, put one of those plastic guns that had the little rounds of gunpowder in them. Can't remember the name of them. He aims at us, fires 2 shots, then puts it back in his cup holder and faces forward, waiting for the train to pass. I don't remember if we said anything to him. I think we were just baffled. We both waited for the train to pass and he went on his way. Weird. Story 13. When I was 8, my granddad died. Soon after, before he was cremated, I was visiting my gran, and I saw him walk into their bedroom wearing a nightgown. I ran to my mother and told her, and she said she could smell his cologne in the hall, where I had just seen him. I'm not a religious person, and I don't even trust that it wasn't grief mixed with imagination, but it felt very real. Story 14. I was at work one day when this guy came in. He was the type you had to watch carefully anyway. When I asked how I could help him, he turned to look at me, and he was foaming at the mouth. I called my manager up, and he was trying to talk to him. The guy swallowed the foam and asked for a bag. When my manager handed it to him, the guy was carrying a toothbrush. Guess he didn't spit. Story 15. I once saw a horrible, violent situation between 2 men. It was brief and awful, but it was also truly bizarre to see a glitter-dusted man in gold-hot pants running for his life straight up the middle of the road from an enormous drag queen in both height and girth, still in full costume and armed with a machete. Story 16. I was having a hot shower in a closed shower stall one time, and the balance of temperature and airflow must have been just right for this to happen. A single hair was floating in the air, going in circles, round and round, up and down, and every time I thought it would fall down, it kept going. It went on for a good few minutes and only ended because I stupidly cracked open the shower door to say, "Hey honey, come look at this." Story 17. I had some ghost encounters when I was a young teenager. Turns out it was just anxiety and sleep deprivation. Sometimes I saw my own self and could interact with it, but it was evil. Story 18. Went to a night market in Chiang Rai. I'm grossed out by cockroaches that seem to be in abundance there, so was very wary of anything on the ground and constantly checking below me. Was looking for a table to have a beer. Someone posed a dead rat underneath a chair as if it was bench pressing the chair. I don't know why. I don't know how. I just know I picked a spot a few tables over, because you. Story 19. I was probably 6 or 7. I was at a pet store with my dad that he went to often because they had a good fish section, and my dad had 2 fish tanks that he was very invested in. While he was talking to the employee about something they would recommend or whatever, I was off in the store just browsing. A kid, probably a couple years older than me, came out from behind a fish tank, like from the employees only area, the back of the store, and motioned me with his fingers to follow him to the area behind all of the fish tank displays. He then took out a tube of toothpaste from his pocket and squeezed a bunch into his mouth and chewed it and swallowed it. He then offered me the tube and said, "Hey, do you want some?" I didn't say anything. I turned around and went to go find my dad. And then I held his hand until he bought whatever fish supplies he needed, and then we drove home. I wonder where that kid is now. Does he still enjoy eating Aquafresh? Does he understand and realize that I will remember his offering of his toothpaste to me that day in the pet store until my final days? Story 20. Sometime in the 1970s, my brother and I were out in the barnyard scooping up manure by moonlight, around 8 p.m.-ish, when we looked up for some reason and saw a nebulous, opaque green floating mildly glowing form. Like a dense little cloud lit from within, green. This was over our little horse farm in Chesterfield, Virginia. There were about 4 of those things, and they hovered up high, about 3,000 feet, for 20 minutes or so. We called the news in the library the next day, but no one told us anything. They didn't know a thing they said.